My name is Emma. I'm 29, and the day my life split in two started over a casserole. My sister slapped a stack of crisp government securities down in the middle of my parents' dining table like she'd just won the lottery. "Found your little savings," she sang, waving the bonds so the light caught the embossed seals. $360,000, just sitting there. Thanks for the college fund. My parents actually laughed. My mom's eyes shone with pride I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "See?" she said, hand to her chest. "She's finally being responsible, investing. You could learn something from your sister, Emma." My throat went dry. Those weren't her investments. They weren't even mine. Not really. They were protected government securities assigned to me for work, locked in a safe only I was supposed to access, tracked by serial number down to the last digit. If those certificates were on this table, they had been stolen out of my house, out of my safe, out of my career, and out of any version of my life where I didn't end up in handcuffs. My sister grinned, enjoying the way my parents were beaming at her. "Relax," she smirked, flicking one of the bonds with a manicured nail. "You've got plenty. Besides, nobody got hurt, right?" I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just pushed my chair back, walked into the hallway, and made one call. My sister taunted, "Found your little savings," waving the papers. "Thanks for the college fund." Parents beamed proudly. I made one call. Someone burst through the door. Before I tell you who stepped through that door, and what it cost every single one of us, tell me, what time is it where you are, and what country are you watching from? I want to see just how far this family disaster will travel. By the time those bonds hit my parents' table, the damage had started 12 hours earlier, while I was still at my desk on the 22nd floor of a federal contractor's office, fighting with a spreadsheet. My phone buzzed with a notification from my home security app. "Alert. Safe room access detected. Code entered." I froze. I lived alone. I hadn't given anyone the combination to that room, let alone the safe inside it. At first, I told myself it was a glitch, a delayed sync, a random ping from old activity. Then another alert. "Unknown device connected to internal Wi-Fi." The little map showed movement in my hallway, then my bedroom. My stomach twisted, but I was on a deadline, and logic fought panic. Maybe I'd left something open. Maybe the cleaner had come on the wrong day. Maybe. I thumbed the live camera feed. It buffered, glitched, and died. That was when real dread started. The heavy kind that sits at the base of your spine and whispers worst-case scenarios. I'm not just somebody with some savings. I was, a compliance officer in a firm that handles protected government securities, the kind that are boring on paper and lethal to your career if anything goes missing. Part of my job is to store client securities in a fireproof safe at my home office until they're transferred to long-term storage. Every certificate is logged, insured, audited. If so much as one bond walks away, it's my head. I called the security monitoring line, went through the usual script, and scheduled a technician to check the system the next morning. I told myself I was being paranoid. I turned my phone face down, finished my reports, let my coworkers drag me out for a late drink, and didn't go home until close to midnight. Walking into my house, nothing looked disturbed. No broken windows, no drawers pulled out. Only the faint smell of my sister's perfume in the hallway. The sweet, expensive one I could never justify buying. I told myself I was imagining it, until I opened the door to my office and saw the painting askew above the safe room keypad. The code panel blinked patiently, waiting. Someone had used it recently. Someone who knew the 6 digits I had never written down. Tell me honestly, if you got an alert that someone accessed the one place in your home that could destroy your entire career, would you brush it off like I did? Or would you have turned around right then and there? I went straight for the small console tucked behind my office monitor, the one that stored my internal security footage. No rewinding 4 times, no dramatic replays. Just my shaking finger dragging the timeline back to the moment my phone had buzzed that afternoon. The screen filled with a grainy view of my hallway. The timestamp matched the alert exactly. For a second, the camera showed nothing but the closed front door. Then it opened, and my sister walked in like she owned the place. Hoodie up, sunglasses on, but the tilt of her chin, the way she kicked off her shoes and left them in the middle of the floor, that was unmistakable. Maybe if it had stopped there, I could have told myself she'd just dropped by, let herself in with the spare key my parents still had. But she moved with purpose, straight down the hall like she'd memorized the layout, turning into my office without hesitation. In the safe room camera, I watched her reach behind the framed print and tap in digits on the keypad with casual confidence. 6 numbers, no pauses, no mistakes. The lock light flicked green. She smirked directly into the lens as if she knew it was there. "Smile," she mouthed, and my heart slammed into my ribs. The safe room door opened, and she disappeared inside. The angle in there is tighter, focused mostly on the safe and the small desk. I watched her pull a slim black case from her backpack. Not lockpicks, not this time. Instead, she pulled out a worn notebook, flipped to a page, glanced down, and then turned the safe dial, entering the mechanical backup code I keep in my head, the one you use if the digital lock fails. The combination that isn't written anywhere. She didn't even hesitate. The door swung open. She reached in, lifted out the neat stacks of government bonds, and fanned them like a deck of cards. Eyes shining. "Jackpot," she whispered. She didn't bag them or hide them. She just cradled them to her chest like her birthright, then closed the safe and walked out as calmly as she'd come. I replayed only one part, zooming in on that notebook when she flipped it open. Even in the blur, I recognized the handwriting. Mine. Months earlier, my mom had begged me to write down some important passwords for an emergency file she keeps. I'd written partial hints for my parents, never the full codes, never the whole combination, but apparently I'd underestimated how easily my sister could fill in the gaps. That wasn't just theft. That was premeditated. It meant she'd gone through my parents' things, found that file, pieced together the code, and still decided it was worth risking prison. Watching her walk out with government securities that weren't hers and weren't truly mine, a question lodged in my throat. When your own sister is the one who can send you to prison by what she's done, do you protect her? Or do you protect yourself and everyone those bonds belong to? The invitation to dinner had been on my phone for days before the footage. Family night. No excuses, my mom had texted, complete with heart emojis. I almost canceled after what I saw, but a darker part of me wanted to see how far my sister would take it. I printed stills of the serial numbers, pulled the audit file from work, and tucked them into my bag. Proof. If I confronted her, I wanted more than just emotion. By the time I arrived at my parents' house that evening, everyone was already there. My sister was in the kitchen, laughing with my mom like they hadn't spent the last decade cleaning up her messes. Growing up, she was the wild one, the one who crashed cars and charmed teachers, and always seemed to get another chance. I was the responsible one, the quiet shadow who fixed things and kept records and signed forms. Responsibility gets you respect at work. At home, it gets you taken for granted. We sat down. Small talk, clinking silverware, the usual interrogation about my love life. Then my sister stood up, cleared her throat dramatically, and fetched the stack of bonds from her bag with a flourish, like she was presenting a cake. The sight of those certificates on my parents' table made my vision narrow. She'd kept them loose, not even in an envelope. My dad's eyes widened. "Is that?" My mom clasped her hands. She told us she's been investing, Emma. She said she wanted to surprise us. We're so proud of how she's turning things around. My sister leaned against the chair, basking in it. See? I told you they're legit. Nice, right? A little government-backed safety net. Thought I'd put them where they'll actually do some good. Put them back, I said. The words came out low and flat. The room went quiet. My mom frowned at me like I'd ruined a birthday. Emma, don't be rude. Your sister's trying to share her good news. I forced myself to breathe. Those are not hers. They're not mine. They're assigned to my firm and my clients. They were taken out of my safe, my work safe. If they don't go back, I lose my job and possibly my freedom. This isn't a cute surprise. My dad's fork hovered midair. He looked between us, confused, the way he always did when the reality of consequences intruded on his idea of family harmony. My sister just rolled her eyes. God, Em, always so dramatic. You have plenty of assets. I'm just borrowing. I know what I'm doing. Borrowing? From government securities that are literally logged at my job? I asked. Did you even think about what happens to me if they're missing during an audit? She tilted her head, feigning innocence, but there was a glint in her eye that made my skin crawl. Maybe if you trusted your family a little more, you wouldn't always feel like you're under attack. That was the moment I realized we weren't dealing with an impulsive mistake. She'd weighed what it would cost me and decided my future was an acceptable price for her immediate comfort. Tell me, if your parents were smiling at the person who'd just quietly detonated your career, would you blow up the dinner, or would you swallow it to keep the peace? I didn't blow up the dinner. Not right away. I stood up, picked up the stack of bonds with both hands, and carefully straightened them. These leave with me, I said. They're not a party trick. My sister's smile snapped. You can't just watch me. I slipped them back into the envelope I'd brought, matching serials as fast as my brain could process them, heart pounding. My mom's cheeks flushed. Emma, sit down. We can talk about this. We're already talking, I said. We're talking about felony theft and fraud. Don't use that word in this house, my dad snapped, startling us both. There it was, the line. Family problems were mistakes, misunderstandings, phases. Never crimes, never something you called strangers in uniforms about. My sister seized on it. See? Dad gets it. I'm not some criminal. I just needed a little help. The kid's tuition is due. The medical bills are stacked. She caught herself too late. My mom's eyes widened. What bills? My sister wrapped her arms around herself. It doesn't matter. I'm handling it. I did some research, okay? These bonds are government-backed, safe. It's not like I blew it in Vegas. I was going to cash a few, pay everyone back, and return the rest. Emma has so much. She wouldn't even notice. There it was. The truth, or at least a version of it. Not a spur-of-the-moment grab, but a plan. An entitlement. My assets, my career, my reputation. Things she considered a bottomless well she could siphon from without asking. I thought of all the times I'd bailed her out before. The credit card she maxed at 19, the rent she forgot to pay, the car insurance I covered when her license was about to be suspended. Each time my parents had pressed my hand and whispered, "You're the only one she listens to," as if that were a compliment rather than a sentence. Maybe that's why what I said next came out so calm. You didn't ask me, I said. You didn't even tell me. You broke into my house. You used codes you weren't supposed to know. You stole from clients whose names you don't even know. That's not borrowing. That's not family. That's something I'd have to report even if it were a stranger. My sister's eyes shimmered, but not with remorse, with fury. So what? You're going to call the cops? On me? On your own blood? You'd put me in prison over some stupid papers? The words hit like thrown stones. I heard my mom's breath hitch. My dad pushed back from the table, jaw clenched. The old Emma would have folded. The old Emma would have offered a secret payment plan, a frantic scramble to cover the missing assets before anyone noticed. But the image of my sister grinning at the camera as she opened my safe burned behind my eyelids. She'd looked proud, triumphant, like she'd finally outplayed the responsible one. "I have to report the breach to my firm," I said. "What happens after that is out of my hands." In truth, that was only half true. I still had a sliver of control. I could drag my feet, soften the language, bury details. Or I could do what I'd been trained to do: follow procedure, protect the clients and the integrity of the system, even if the threat was sitting at my parents' table. I left the dinner early, the bonds in my bag, my parents' disappointment heavy between my shoulder blades. In the driveway, I called someone from work whose number I'd never thought I'd use outside of drills. As the line rang, a question rattled through my head that I still don't fully have an answer to. Is it more cruel to let your sister walk into an arrest she earned, or to cover for her and live the rest of your life waiting for the knock at your own door? The man who picked up at the other end of the line introduced himself as Internal Security, but I already knew his name from compliance trainings and boring PowerPoints about escalation pathways. His voice was steady. Mine wasn't. I laid it out clinically: unauthorized access, compromised safe, removal of protected government securities, suspected family member as perpetrator. I offered to email the footage, the serial numbers, everything. There was a pause, the kind where you imagine the person on the other end covering the receiver to swear. "You did the right thing calling," he said finally. "This is serious. I'm looping in legal and our federal liaison. From this point on, you document every contact you have with your sister. Do not confront her alone again. Do not make any promises about keeping this quiet. Understood?" I understood more than he said. I understood my career might survive if I cooperated fully. I understood that if I hesitated, the story could be twisted into negligence, or worse, collusion. I understood that my sister had set a match to my life and walked away whistling, assuming I'd smother the fire for her like always. A flash forward flickered through my mind. A door bursting open. Agents in jackets with 3 bold letters. My parents' faces collapsing as they watched their favorite child in handcuffs. I almost hung up. Instead, I asked the question that felt like treason. "What happens to her?" "That's not for me to say," he replied. "Once we file, it's in the hands of the agencies we notify. Best thing you can do for everyone involved is tell the truth." We ended the call with instructions: send the footage, secure the bonds, do not warn her in a way that could be seen as tipping off a suspect. I forwarded the files with shaking hands, hit send, and watched my outbox swallow the life I'd known. That night, my phone lit up over and over with my sister's name. I let it go to voicemail until the 3rd call, when something in me snapped and I answered. "What did you do?" she hissed, skipping any greeting. In the background, I could hear the muffled sounds of the TV and my parents' voices. She was still at their house. "I returned what you stole," I said, "and I reported the breach." "Breach," she mocked. "Listen to yourself. Nobody got hurt. You love rules more than your own family." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a heartbeat the little girl version of her flashed in my memory, the one who used to sneak into my bed after nightmares. Then I remembered her looking straight into my security camera and smiling. "You put me in this position," I said quietly. "You used my parents, my trust, my job. You broke into my home. You gambled my freedom without even asking. I'm done choosing you over the truth." There was a ragged exhale on the other end. "They're going to come here, aren't they?" she whispered. "You did this, Emma. You're the one who brought them into our house." "You brought them in when you opened my safe," I replied. She swore, A low, ugly sound, and hung up. The next morning, internal security called back. The case had escalated. A joint team would be visiting my parents' house to recover any related evidence and conduct interviews. They wanted me present, not as a suspect this time, but as a complainant and primary witness. As I drove to my parents' neighborhood at the appointed time, that flash-forward sharpened into reality. A dark sedan ahead of me, another behind, a coordinated stop. Agents stepping out, straightening their jackets. My childhood home looming at the end of the cul-de-sac. Blinds fluttering. Have you ever walked into a scene knowing you're the reason strangers with badges are about to step over your parents' threshold? We didn't knock dramatically. Real life isn't a cop show. One of the agents rang the bell while another waited just out of sight. I stood a few feet back, heart hammering so loudly I barely heard my mom's cheerful, "Coming!" through the door. When she opened it and saw me flanked by two strangers, her smile faltered. "Emma? What's all this?" Before I could answer, my sister's voice floated from the dining room. "Is that her?" She finally decided to crawl back. Then she stepped into view, saw the badges, and went paper white. One agent introduced himself and his partner using calm, measured words. "Ongoing investigation, financial irregularities. Need to ask some questions." My dad sputtered about warrants and misunderstandings. My mom demanded to know why no one had called them first. My sister just stared at me like I'd pulled the trigger myself. "You did this," she mouthed. The agents were polite but firm. They had paperwork. They had my reports, the footage, the audit trail. They asked to see my sister's room. She bolted. That was the only moment that felt like TV. The sudden scramble, the chair clattering over as she tried to dart past them toward the back door. One agent caught her by the arm. The other stepped in front of her path. The door burst inward as more officers came through, summoned by a signal I hadn't even noticed. "Don't touch me!" she screamed. "Emma, tell them! Tell them it was a misunderstanding." They found more than I'd expected in her room. Not just notes about my safe and the access codes, but printouts of client profiles, scribbled calculations, even a list labeled "Next Options" with other family members' assets jotted underneath. It wasn't a one-time slip. It was a pattern in progress. The question of motive answered itself. She was drowning in debts and bad decisions, and the pressure of maintaining an image she could never afford. And she'd decided our family was her personal lifeline to cut and splice as needed. But drowning doesn't give you the right to drag someone else under. My parents watched, stunned, as the agents read her rights. They didn't put her in handcuffs in front of them. Small mercies. But the message was clear. She was no longer just the wild one. She was a suspect in a federal case. At the station later, in a bland interview room that smelled like coffee and old fear, they sat us in separate spaces. I gave my statement, trying to keep my voice steady, sticking to facts. Unauthorized access, stolen securities. How I'd discovered it, what I'd done. They asked if I wanted to press charges personally on top of the institutional case. Saying yes felt like signing the death certificate of the family I grew up in. Saying no felt like volunteering to be her insurance policy forever. In the end, I said, I want the record to reflect exactly what she did. Whatever the law says happens after that. I'll live with it. Months blurred. There were plea negotiations, tearful voicemails from my parents begging me to fix this, awkward HR meetings about my future at the firm. Internal investigations concluded that I had followed procedure once I became aware of the breach. I kept my job, though my career path now had a permanent asterisk. My sister took a deal. Reduced prison time in exchange for cooperation and restitution plans that would probably haunt her finances for the rest of her life. My parents never forgave me fully. Not out loud. In their version of events, their daughter made a mistake, and their other daughter brought in the wolves instead of keeping it in the family. In mine, I finally stopped being the quiet shield that let everyone else pretend we were fine. About a year after the arrest, I got a letter from my sister. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. She apologized in the roundabout way people do when they're not sure they mean it yet. She wrote about therapy sessions and responsibility, and how she'd convinced herself she was just borrowing because the alternative, admitting she was stealing her sister's life, was unbearable. She ended with a question. Do you think there's any version of our future